Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this very special edition of the JS Mindset Weekly Call. My name's Denny. Today is Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020. It's winter solstice. Bill, Jim, and Dave and I all wanted to share something special with you for the holidays. And Jim has made arrangements for the new Chief Executive Officer of Tanzanian Gold Corporation to share some time with us. Stephen Maloney joined TRX at the beginning of December. And prior to that, Stephen was a partner and managing director with PricewaterhouseCoopers Corporate Finance and was also PwC Canada's Deals Mining Leader. And in that role, Steve advised and assisted Canadian and international clients in making some pretty key strategic and financing decisions. Steve's clients include large private and public enterprises, multinational firms, governments, trading houses, and international state-owned entities. He has led over 75 merger and acquisitions. He has done capital raises, restructuring, and divestiture transactions across a diverse range of industries. Stephen, welcome to the call. I really sort of shortchanged you on all of your experience. You're also a chartered professional accountant, a chartered accountant, CFA charter holder, and you've done more financial deals in the mining industry than folks can possibly imagine. Welcome. It's good to have you, Steve.
Well, thank you. It's very nice to be here, and I very much look forward to the conversation today. Yeah, it's certainly a very, very interesting time, and the company TRX is really at an interjection and has quite significant growth plans ahead.
Let's just start there, Steve. What did you see in TRX that convinced you when Jim called and started just sort of broaching the subject? You're now our CEO, and that's, you've got quite a successful career in assisting mining operations all over the world. Why TRX? Why did you come and join us?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So over my career, I've been exposed to so many situations, a lot of things that were going right situations, things were going sideways, and a lot of growth profiles right across the board, right from operations and dealing with general managers, right up to dealing with mining ministers, right up to dealing with CEOs and chairmen of boards. So I've got a very, very broad experience. Like I like to say, I've probably been exposed to more in the mining industry as a professional than any one professional in the last 10 years, given my prior role. What interests me about TRX and why TRX? So one thing is I've been offered all kinds of positions within the mining industry over the last 5 years. And one aspect that really interests me right now is timing. I think everybody believes that we're entering into a new gold cycle, and the gold prices should continue to move higher, and especially under this guise of quantitative easing, which is happening right across the world. And so when you look at that backdrop, you want to get into assets in which you feel there's going to be a great value proposition for shareholders over time. And one of the things that I've learned over time is mining assets, you have to look at assets first. And when we look at the Buckreef deposit, we have significant scale in over 2.5 million resources, 2.6, that has significant resource upside. There are a lot of exploration targets. It's open along strike, and it's open at depth. So there's a very large probability to expand that resource profile. One of the things that I really look at is it's not a science project. It's in a greenstone belt. It will have straightforward metallurgy. So it won't have some of the problems that you saw in the last cycle, people trying to put in place very complex mining operations. This one should be a straightforward flow sheet with straightforward metallurgy, which means decent and high recovery rates. And when you look at also what really interests me is it has a avenue to cash flow fairly quickly, and it has a good oxide mine operation. So there's a big separation between the oxide mine plan and the sulfide project. The oxide mine plan is straightforward and can be into production very quickly at a reasonable capital cost and help fund development costs of the sulfide project. Another thing that really interests me is we were able to get to scale on the amount of resources in a reasonable time frame. So we should be able to produce well over 100,000 ounces for 10 plus years, which then becomes a significantly valued mining asset. And it's also of the nature that the CapEx will not be like other mining assets. It will not break the bank. We're not even going to look close to $500 million like a lot of mining operations will out there. The CapEx here should come in over time to be a very, very reasonable and doable number to be financed. So those are some of the real things that I looked at. And then, the country interests me too. So whenever you have a country that has had changes in their mining laws and other laws over the last 5 years, it takes investors time to get comfortable with those changes. And there's a little bit of a short-term reaction in that. But as investors get comfortable with the new mining laws and the way things will work in the future, your capital will start to flow back in to those jurisdictions. And before I joined, I was already seeing that. South African banks are lending. We have European banks lending in there. We have Japanese trading houses investing in junior companies with assets in Tanzania. So we're starting to see that flow back into that jurisdiction as people become comfortable with the new laws of the land.
Steve, let's expand on that just a second. We have watched banks and finance pools in a very reluctant posture to loan money to the exploratory and junior gold mining industry in the last several years. And the industry is just terribly underfinanced. Share with us what is meant by de-risking in the analysis of mines mining as one would approach bankers and investors. Let's talk about de-risking.
Yeah, so that's a good concept and a good way of phrasing it, Denny, because in the last mining cycle, there were a lot of assets that expanded very quickly. They didn't put in place the proper procedures in order to de-risk an asset and rushed to production. So what ended up happening in that rush to production is there were mistakes made, particularly around metallurgy and de-risking the asset to make sure that the asset is going to work. So what you see now is a result of the last mining cycle is a little bit more cautiousness on behalf of the lending institutions to ensure that their capital is taken care of, the proper de-risking procedures were put in place in order to make sure an asset is successful. So one of the major things that lenders will look at is the metallurgical composition of ores. And what testing and work has been done around those ores in order to ensure that the processing plant that's put in place will actually produce significant amounts of gold at the end of the day at decent recovery rates as advertised in studies. So when you look at that, TRX has hired SGS Lakefield to lead the technical side of that sort of work. They have done significant test work already from the 3 drill hole core samples that we did send them. You'll hear more about that in the coming in the new year, and we want to make sure that when we have a mine plan that's put into place, when we go to the market to raise financing, that the proper work has been done to de-risk the asset so that what we say we're going to do, we're actually going to be able to do. And we want to make sure that we hire the best professionals to do that. I know from my experience in the past, SGS is probably the leader in that regard, and they certainly have a world-class reputation around those sort of things, and also around mine modeling, around stability testing, all of those sort of things. SGS, who is our strategic partner, has significant experience behind.
One of the things when we look at the 43101, the technological report of just what those assets are, it appears that those assets are just straight up and down. I mean, they're not spread out. They are not, if not conical, certainly cylindrical, straight up and down. You talk about the importance of having good partners with Bateman, Lakefield. The structural integrity as we go deep, Will that be a de-risking factor that banks and financial people will be looking at also?
Yes. So when you put forward a mine plan, they're going to want to make sure the numbers in the mine plan are correct, and the outside consultants certainly help you make sure that those numbers are right. So when you're talking about the assets, you're talking about the nature and structure of the deposit here, and one thing that it will be looked at over time is rock mechanics and what our pit slopes can be, particularly for that sulfide pit. So certainly there's going to be quite a bit of work that has already been done and quite a bit of work going forward around that to ensure, again, that for the long term, and that's just for the long term of all stakeholders involved here, including the government on the revenue side and including the shareholders on the TRX side, that those sort of things are run to ground and done properly.
When we look at all of the exploratory mines that have suddenly sort of boosted themselves up to more juniors, and when we see some of the juniors that have become majors, everybody is looking for which one of these mining companies should we look at. What do you think the markets are looking for when they're trying to decide which mining company to take their clients when they suggest a stock position in the mining industry? What do you think the markets are really looking for, Steve?
Yeah, I would segregate the market a little bit. You have the majors, obviously, and then they cater to a certain type of investor. And then you have exactly what you're describing in juniors. I think what the people are looking for is which juniors have a straightforward path to value creation and have the management team in place to achieve that value creation, and which ones are going to give them the best risk rate of return. When I look at our business plan that we have in place, I believe it's built on 4 pillars. One pillar is putting in place an oxide mine plan, which is very achievable and quick to production. The next pillar is moving along a very, very robust feasibility study on the sulfide and then starting to put that into place from a production perspective after that study is done. The next pillar is making sure that we continue to grow the resource base, and we have lots of options around that. We have lots of targets to drill out. We have also got a lot of in-pit drilling to do to convert resources to a better category, so inferred to measured and indicated, and also to increase that base. And then from an ESG perspective, we're very aligned with our local stakeholders, our country stakeholders, and ultimately our own shareholders in that whole value creation metrics. And I believe also, there's re-rate potentials all along that curve in order for us to be a significant story and a significant value creation to everybody and all our stakeholders throughout the process as we continue to move along the asset and de-risk it over the next couple of years. Now, I'm very excited for what's ahead of us.
Back in the 1990s, Jim Sinclair wrote a book, and he talked about, in general terms, what mining in the future resource acquisition would look like, and we would be leaving a colonializing posture and more to a partnership posture. We have come at this project with a partnership with a country that had been taken advantage of, I guess is the best word. Talk to me about this new partnership approach for all of the stakeholders. It's exciting to be a part of that as a stakeholder myself.
Yeah, and I think, Denny, I'm going to address your question in 2 phases. I'm going to address what you say first in taking advantage of. And, whenever you have a populace that has that underlying feeling, they want to bring their laws and regulations up to code versus other jurisdictions. And I think, as I said earlier, that takes a little bit of time for investors to get comfortable with, but once they get comfortable with it, capital comes in quite quickly. With regards to Jim, look, Jim, as everybody realizes, is a visionary. He's absolutely right in his book in the 1990s. The key to resource development is working with local communities, working with local governments, and aligning everybody's interest to be aligned with those parties, those stakeholders, and your shareholders at the same time. It can be done. It can be done quite successfully. And in his visionary aspect of that, that is one of the reasons and foremost reasons why the government of Tanzania, through the state-owned mining entity, Stiminco, has a 45% interest in this asset. It aligns interest right across the board. The asset has significant scale, grade, to make sure that this is a long-term asset for the benefit of all stakeholders, including local peoples and our shareholders in TRX.
In my first conversation with you, Steve, I was touched by your addressing a virtual business model, such to the point that you recognized that just as the Sinclair family over the last 30, 40 years has done everything in their power to bring up the people where their assets are. It's a matter of, I can't remember exactly how many schools and hospitals are named after a Sinclair, but I sensed from you that same commitment that, look, people are going to benefit from our operations in TRX right there in Tanzania. You want to share some of that vision and philosophy with us?
Yeah, so my vision and philosophy really is if you take care of local stakeholders, which is what you just mentioned in working with local communities to help them achieve and build what their needs are, we need to work with them to figure out what their needs are and what their desires are around schooling and hospitals, etc. It's not our job to tell them what they need. We need to hear it from them. We need to make sure that we do that across at a local level, at a national level. And then when we get that right, then we'll be able to move in place a very big mining operation that is really good and aligns interests with our shareholders. And I think that is a very large philosophy. One of the new additions to the board in Andrew Cheadle, you would have heard his interviews over the last month or so on various news channels. And he very much takes the same philosophy that Jim has, that I have, and we will always exhibit that from a business perspective. But ultimately, we need to make sure as well that all aligns into shareholder value.
Those of you who have begun listening to us here on the JS Mindset call, Steve just recognized Andrew Cheadle. There was a terrific audio report that I heard. Andrew Cheadle was speaking in that. I believe it was a Kitco call, so if you want to do a simple search on Kitco, Kitco, you should be able to hear that link. Steve, I was so impressed when Jim brought both Andrew and you into the fold, onto the board. Give us a little bit more background on your exposure to Andrew. He has lived it in the mining industry, has he not?
Yeah, look, Andrew has a very, very good background. He is extremely well known in mining circles by a lot of people and a lot of organizations, a lot of investors, a lot of financiers. One of his former roles was as chairman of the PDAC. So in that role, obviously, you got a lot of exposure. And he's been exposed to African miners significantly throughout his career. And look, it's a pleasure to work with Andrew and to move things forward with him. Him and I, through his previous roles, have had, and my previous roles, have had significant exposure to one another, and we have a very, very, very good working relationship. And and similar visions ultimately to where we want to get to and how we want to move things forward along with Jim.
You spoke earlier about your 4-pillar plan. Everybody's got the long-term goals, the short-term goals, and the goals that just have to be attended to. What are you most excited about in this coming year? You've got a lot on the plate. I rather imagine sooner or later you're going to have that plane ticket to Tanzania, but what are you most excited about in the coming year?
There's a lot of things to be excited about in the coming year. I think the most exciting parts of our plan is really moving the asset forward and working with our local stakeholders to ensure that happens and continually move the asset forward. I'm going to be optimistic as any miner on what our drill hole results are going to show, particularly on Blue Sky. That can be exciting. I'm going to be excited to finally get confirmation on what metallurgical results will look like. I'm going to be excited to expand the test plant and to begin mining operations along the oxides. There's just so many aspects here to be excited about, and I hope all of us on the call who are listening will get excited by what will happen to the gold price as well, which is a helpful wind at our back per se in moving all of these sort of things forward. So I look again. I think it's an extremely exciting time for this company, and we're in a great position.
I was always taught to talk about the excitement first to keep your enthusiasm. Obviously, there's probably going to be some challenges. Can we talk about some of the challenges, not just for TRX, but for the mining industry, finance, and what are some of the things that might be of concern to you in the coming year?
Yeah, some of the things that can be of concern, obviously, COVID. COVID is a big concern, and this isn't just the mining industry, but it's just across the board in general. So this company has been able to do significant things during the COVID environment, which has been very impressive. If you look at what the company's done in the last year in a COVID sort of environment, it's been very impressive. I really look forward to the day that we get to more normalized sort of travel and health related environment. I think COVID can particularly cause some delays, particularly around people movement, because ultimately in a mining asset, you do need some of these professionals to be on site. You do need them to be moving around and talking and sharing ideas with one another. So, I think my biggest concern would be, what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks is, does COVID take on or it doesn't improve as quickly as we would hope? I think that's the major thing that's on everybody's mind. We're all hopeful that it doesn't, and we all stay healthy.
Steve, you've got 140 employees on the ground in Tanzania. You've got a full-blown campus with commissary. You've got, virtually a city within a city. It is not like a major where they build cities around their mines. What other type of key personnel will you be looking to add to the management team or to the scientific team as you continue building a world-class mining operation around TRX?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because as you begin to grow, you get some of exactly what you just described. Essentially, what I'll call it is good growing pains. I think there's a couple of functions around the organization, both at the corporate level, in which we could improve, and certainly there will be professionals in that regard at the corporate level that will need to be brought on board. And I also think we'll be working with our joint venture partner in ensuring that the team on the ground executing the asset is capable of executing the asset. They currently are, but we'll be looking to supplement that team with very strong technical people. I'm a firm believer that, my background has been advisory, finance, strategic advisory, valuation, and value creation. and have touched a lot of aspects of mining operations, and I've gone and been at mining operations for significant periods of time. But we also need to supplement that sort of visionary aspect with very strong technical people. So I think you'll see over time the technical bench strength is strong today, and I believe you'll see it really get stronger tomorrow.
Steve, you may be reluctant to tackle this next question. From my standpoint, I always looked in my companies to get away from financing as quickly as I could, and I needed to establish cash flow. Have you looked at the cash flow models as we bring the test plant into place at, I think it's 5 tons per hour, and as we move towards, north of 20, maybe on towards 40 tons per hour? Talk to us about how the cash flow model will keep you out of, keep you out of equity markets is where I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Denny, and then that's one that, I get asked quite a bit, and it's one that I really, as part of my prior roles, planned with companies quite a bit as well, because, you want to make sure that when you do financings and when you want cash flow that it's available for you. So, what I can say there is the oxide plant will help alleviate some of that cash flow burden. But what I will also say is the nature of the mining industry is one of such that, I consider some financings to be accretive in nature. So if you were to do some financings to raise your exploration budget, and you were finding, for instance, in the last drill campaign, ounces at $6 per ounce, and they're worth $100 in the market, well, then that's accretive to everyone. If you're moving forward your operations to de-risk them significantly, to give shareholders and market participants and other financiers the comfort level that you're a higher probability of going into production, that's going to raise your overall resource base value. And so there's a delicate balance between not diluting, being accretive, and moving assets forward. So what I can say wholeheartedly to everyone out there is I'm very aligned and very centered on share price growth and shareholder value. And that is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, as Jim does and others on the board. And we will be looking to make sure that anything that we do is creating shareholder value and share price appreciation over time.
You've picked a wonderful time to set sail in your ship of state here. You've got the winds at your back. I believe that COVID is going to be solved sooner rather than later. Certainly the price of gold is going up, as you, in your introductory remarks here, you said with the price of gold going up, that's going to lift a lot of boats out there. And then we've got central banks who are providing quantitative easing. Are there any other winds at your back that you are recognizing right now that will just improve our forecasts?
Are you specifically talking about winds at the back around the asset or winds at the back of general market conditions?
General market conditions is what I will have. I can come back and we can talk about the assets for TRX, but I'm really looking at the general market flavors right now.
Yeah, I think there could be some other winds at the back, and obviously these are more of opinions that we have or we may share. I think, over time around cryptocurrencies, there will be more regulation around them. I think they are probably due for somewhat of an unwind, and I think that will be good for gold, and that would be a significant wind at the back. I also think that given just sheer, we talk about central banks printing and things like that, but I think just the sheer level of debt on the balance sheets of governments, and I'll even include households in there, that interest rates, in order to have an economic recovery, are going to be required to be lower for longer. And part of quantitative easing is obviously buying of treasuries and bonds to lower those interest rates. So I think that is a general macro theme that will continue to be at play. I also think from a gold market perspective, we all hope that there is a swift economic recovery. But I think the economic recovery will be a little choppier than it has been. Governments have delayed bankruptcies, etc. And I think as we get into a more normalized environment, we'll see some of that choppiness. And ultimately, that is good for the underlying gold price as well. So I think, we do have a period of time here from an adjustment perspective, and it won't be as straightforward as people think it will be.
Steve, that's all I have for you. You're a gentleman and a scholar. You have not held back one thing. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the JS Mindset listening folks?
Look, I'm glad to be part of the interview, and I'm very excited, Tenny, for what we have in front of us here. I think, I wouldn't have came over if I didn't think we had a great asset that has significant potential and significant share price appreciation potential in the future. If I didn't really believe in it, and I look forward to working with all the stakeholders, including local stakeholders, national, and shareholders, to help move this asset forward and to reach its full potential. It's a very, very exciting time to be part of this story.
It's exciting to have you. Now, I have to ask you one question about hockey. We've got another hockey player, made his college debut. Bill Holter was a hockey player, and he played defense, and he was mean as a skunk. Tell me what position you played in hockey, son.
So as a kid, I used to like to play forward, and I think I was okay at it. But as an adult, I'm like Bill. I'm a defenseman, and I think when I look back, I should have been a defenseman in my younger days. My father always said, "Son, why are you trying to score all the goals? There's more value in a defenseman. You're better at it." And I should have listened to him.
Fathers are pretty wise. He would have told you the defenseman comes in, he takes out the player and let the forwards and the wings come in and take out and grab the puck. But our job is to knock down the things in front of us. It sounds to me like you're well positioned for that. Stephen Maloney, thank you for joining us today on JS Mindset. Folks, if you'd like to learn more about TRX, I'm going to refer you to Mike Martin. It's m.martin@tangoldcorp.com. You funnel your questions, your thoughts, whatever, through investor relations at TRX. Mike Martin, m.martin@tangoldcorp.com. Stephen, thanks for joining us. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, me too. Jim, I know you've been sitting back patiently. Is there anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye and wish everybody happy holidays?
Well, for the entirety of my career, I've had very good fortune at recognizing value. And the value that I see in Steve is the missing link to the great success I expect from this mission that I'm on.
Good job. Just from my couple conversations with him, I think you've chosen wisely. With that, folks, we will let you go. We wish you all the best for the holidays. As always, remember that money isn't everything. It's just that having money makes things so much easier in life. Truly, it's the people in our lives that are worth $1 million, and especially at this time of year, we just can't forget to tell them so. We'll be back with you soon. We are going to take a little bit of a hiatus for a couple of weeks. This was our holiday present to all of you. We hope you get a chance to listen to it and pass it along to your friends. Thanks again for tuning in to JS Mindset.